Hello and welcome to Unmute Now podcast, season 5. Yes, can you imagine? My name is Natasha Latcham, and with me co hosting today is the lovely Yolande Robertson Green.
Hi, everybody. Thanks to those of you who've been staying with us the whole season. We're at episode 7 and we're winding down. So, hello again, guys.
And guys, for those of you who might not be aware, our third member, Angela, is currently, well, she's occupied today, so she won't be joining Yolanda and I. And our other member, Raquel, is currently on leave. But of course, Raquel is always behind the scenes and supporting us all the way. So welcome to Unmute Now, where we raise the volume on the whispered conversations in our communities. For today, our topic of discussion is, should we cancel culture? And the framework we're examining it from is the impact that cancel culture has or can have on migrant and minority communities. Joining us in our discussion is Sipho Sibanda. Sipho is a well-known figure in her activism and humanitarian work in the Black and minority ethnic community in Belfast, especially South Belfast. Welcome, Sipho.
Hello. Thank you for welcoming me. Thanks, Natasha.
No
Hi,
problem at all.
Sipho.
Hi, Yolande.
I'm always
Nice to
very
meet you.
nervous. For those of you who recognize this season is a hybrid season, and always very nervous when we're doing the virtual bit, the StreamYard today. I hope all the internet facilities are going to be our best friend. There'll be
Ooh,
no dropping out from Natasha. There'll be no freezing off screens. And if it happens, guys, please forgive us. Grace
yes, yes,
is the key
yes.
word.
Yes, we're praying against the technology gremlins today. So yes, for a smooth take. Sifo, for those of our audience members who might not be familiar with yourself or might not even be from Northern Ireland, because we do have a wide audience, can you just tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Well, it always sounds like a lot, but it's not. I suppose as a woman, you kind of wear a lot of hats without realizing that you're wearing a lot of hats. I suppose I can start from I'm a mother, I'm a sister, I'm a friend, I am an advocate. I don't know if I'm an advocate. Um, I am definitely an activist, and I've been called a leader. Yeah, quite a few things that I do. I am um, I'm part of BME Women's Network. I suppose that's one of the things that I do at the minute. I am deputy chair of BME Women's Network. Um, I am also, I think you in your introduction you mentioned that I'm an activist. Yes, I advocate on issues of any human right issues, and you also mentioned that people may know my face. I stand the last elections, the MLA elections in South Belfast. For I'm not going to promote my party. I know Yolanda is about to smack me. But yes, I am also standing for the council elections right now. So my face will be plastered all over again. And um, maybe I can say the reason I decided to stand in the first place.
Yes, please
Sifo,
do.
yes, please feel free to do that. For me, I've said this to you in our personal conversations that you are a brave woman, and particularly when a person of color or any ethnic minority background within the context of Northern Ireland makes a decision to stand up, in the political arena. To me, it's a very bold and strong decision irrespective of the outcome. And for that, I commend you and I wish you all the best. I'm saying it very, very early up, although we're not talking politics today.
Really appreciate that. I really appreciate that. Honestly, I think as a mother of a teenage boy who is growing up every day in Northern Ireland, I decided for him and other young children that I continue to talk to on a daily basis that kept saying that they don't see themselves in a lot of spaces in Northern Ireland. And we then continued having those conversations with other women in my circles to say, do you know what? There's really very little that represents us as ethnic minorities. And we continued to drum this. And I thought to myself, do you know what? If we don't put ourselves out there, because sometimes we really just say things and we don't put ourselves forward. I've always been very politically clued in, if I may say. I've always had an interest in politics, and I suppose I was active, but in the background of politics. Because of just interests, I suppose. And I'm a socialist, and the party that I represent just said to me, "Why don't you stand? You've been saying this. You've been speaking a lot about representation, all of that. Why don't you represent?" At first, I thought, "What? Are you crazy? I'm not doing that." Because of what you said, it's Northern Ireland. The politics in Northern Ireland, unfortunately, can be contaminated, if I may say. It's about two sides of community, and it's never been about anything but that. And it took a lot of thought. And I thought to myself, do you know what? I have been saying this. Why am I not doing it? Who am I expecting to step forward? And I thought, do you know what? I am actually going to do it. And it was, I suppose, it was a moment of madness. And I thought, I'm going to do it. And I did it. And I stood. And the reception I got was amazing.
Well,
Um,
before we really make this a lot about politics, I have to then
I
give
was
you
about
back
to
to
move
Natasha,
away.
and I have to say that the political arena is one that is an open field for cancel culture. So,
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
coming right back to the discussion on cancel culture, I suppose, Natasha, maybe thoughts in general about cancel culture is what we can share then.
Mm.
Yeah. Well, for me, I guess just in terms of the well, let's just go with the widely accepted definition for cancel culture, even though there are tweaks that come up, every so often. But
Yeah, the definition
de-
has evolved over the years,
yes,
naturally.
for sure. I know primarily when people think about cancel culture, what comes to mind is celebrity and celebrity figures. So one of the definitions is simply that cancel culture refers to the mass withdrawal of support from public figures or celebrities who have done things that aren't socially accepted today. So this practice of canceling or mass shaming often occurs on like social media platforms such as Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook. But I do think sometimes, like even in the past, I think we might have had versions of canceling without the term being applied and without having the big platform that social media affords. When somebody, whether in politics or religion or just some social figure, does something that we think, oh my goodness, I can't believe they did that or said that, and we just inherently pull our support from that person. But I don't think it just needs to be from celebrities. I think there's a lot of people. There are a lot of people and even groups of people who can find themselves victims of cancel culture just for their views. What are your thoughts, ladies?
Yeah, I suppose there's a lot we can say, and probably that has been said out there by many people who have, shared their views on the topic. So, for example, you're right, in my view, in terms of it, cancel culture not always being shouted. We don't always hear somebody shouting, "You're canceled," or we don't always see that happening on social media. But the old boycotting style is still very evident. And in my view, whenever cancel culture is that implicit, is when it's more dangerous to me. The impact is more devastating to the person, an individual, or the entity or the community that is being cancelled, because you can never quite really put your finger on what is happening to you or to your community. And that's when, to me, it has a very, a more severe, in my mind, at least mentally, a more severe mental impact for that person who's a victim of something that they're not entirely sure. And it comes right back to almost like racism, because racism is one of the things that's hardest to prove in a court of law. So whenever you're being canceled and it's implicit, you're not really sure. And that's a difficulty for me.
Yeah.
Yeah. What about you, Sifa? What are your thoughts on cancel culture?
Yeah. Um, as you were just talking there on racism, maybe let me just start by saying the sad thing is cancel culture itself kind of like was the inception was from from free speech. Whoever came up with this was derived from having this free speech. But then at the same time, with that, it kind of limits people from having this free speech. And as soon as you're actually out there and you're saying whatever you think is right, and somebody decides, no, that doesn't, I don't resonate, I don't like what they're saying, and I'm just gonna, pull away, and I will tell my friends or my networks to pull away. And it's so sad because we live in Northern Ireland. It's a very small community. It's not very small, but everybody knows everybody. And it's so easy to get cancelled without it, without even realizing. And 1 minute you're just out in the cold and you see it happening. And sometimes you don't realize that you are part of some kind of cancel culture happening. And people are like, no, don't go. Why are you going? And you're thinking, I actually wanted to go, but no, so and so is not going. Okay, no, we're not going. Without you noticing that there's a lot more going on in the background. But because we're such a close-knit community, we're such a small community, it happens so easily. And it affects us as ethnic minorities because we're small communities in Northern Ireland. The ethnic minority is even smaller. And unfortunately, we as a very small community, if we allow for ourselves to actually partake in this cancel culture, there is no way we'll find our voices within the bigger community. And I see it happening every time. At first, I was not even aware of it. I see it happen, and I'm like, why are we even doing this? Why are we doing this? We all want the same thing, but if we continue to allow ourselves to be part of this cancel culture, we won't get far. We won't get far at all.
I like what you're saying. Sorry, go ahead, Yolanda.
I think, Sifo, you've raised and alluded to a number of issues. I'm sure we're not going to be able to talk about everything. And I'm sure there'll be people out there who will be listening and picking up subliminal messages. There are people out there who would not be agreeing with everything we're saying. But proponents of cancel culture would say it's all about accountability. Let's throw that aside for a minute and obviously delve in a bit more in terms of the issues you've raised, particularly for me, particularly when cancel culture becomes almost black on black. I know I'm using some very strong terms, but when you're a minority and you operate in a very, very small community like this, and one particular person has a dissenting view, and your already small group of people decide they're going to cancel you, you're totally isolated. To me, I'm going to use an example again in how, even as a Black community, the cancer culture can have such a significant impact. Let's just think outside the box for a minute, going to an incident, well, not an incident, a case, a very popular case in Belfast that was, Asha's Bakery, and the case in relation to standing on their religious beliefs and not baking a cake for someone who was of a particular sexual orientation. And obviously, that was a court case, but that particular bakery, if you imagine for a minute that it was not just Christian View, but it was a Black bakery, a Black bakery owner. Within Northern Ireland, when your own community cancels you is worse, but more worse is if you're Black in Northern Ireland or a business, Black business, and you're being cancelled by the whole of Northern Ireland, you literally die. You literally die because we're so small. So you can imagine that Asha's Bakery, had it been owned by a Black person, would not be surviving today, even if they had won their court case. I highly doubt it. And I really believe that people might say, well, not everything would be a Black issue, even if it was owned by a Black person. But a lot of times, cancer culture has a negative impact on Black community if we are the ones that were perhaps to have done something or said something that upset the masses, because we are the minority. So no matter what, we will really suffer one way or the other.
To follow on from what Sifo said before your point, Yolanda, and a bit of what your point, because since we're kind of trying to keep the cancel culture within the framework that we're discussing, the Black and minority ethnic. Whereas, like in the general definition, when that I spoke about earlier, when they were speaking about things that celebrities might have said or done on a major stage that people didn't think were either socially acceptable or morally acceptable or politically acceptable, whatever. Since we're raising the volume on the whispered conversation, let's just put the whispered conversations out there, right? Because you know how I am,
Might
right?
as well.
The thing is, like, if you take it into a smaller context, like the Black and minority ethnic in Northern Ireland, or smaller pocket of communities, you don't have to have said or done something on such a major platform, or something that's so controversial or whatever. For whatever reason, someone might have decided to cancel you or not have any dealings with you, and there was no discussion ever had. It just kind of goes through the community until you realize, well, what's going on? Has this person or this organization been canceled? Where's the support for this? Where's the support for that? And as you alluded to, Sipho, and Yolanda as well, when when you're already a minority in another minority, it's like, what are the greater goals? What are you trying to accomplish? How can you stand united on issues that affect everyone when, I'm saying, you're having all these other small, minor things that, on the undercurrent, so should we bring these things to the table and deal with them, or are we fighting against our own best interests sometimes? For, you guys, I'll take it there. So what are your
Well,
thoughts?
that's one of the alternatives you've raised in terms of other than canceling, a group or an individual. Because for me, I always have one of the negative impacts of cancel culture is the fear of speaking out and sharing your personal views. And I always have that fear because I belong to perhaps a group like UKPivot or Unmute Now, and my opinion might end up getting Unmute Now or UKPivot cancelled. And that's a real possibility. And I suppose in raising alternatives, one of the alternatives that you've mentioned there, Natasha, is bringing the things to the table and speaking about them quite openly as a community, as a small community, rather than canceling or boycotting, whichever word we want to use politically in terms of being politically correct. But for me, just to kind of touch on alternatives, another alternative.
See those expressions over there, and I'm loving it.
I suppose
Yes.
another alternative is whether or not sometimes, and this might sound quite weird, but it's whether or not we can use what may be seen as a dissenting view to really impact our own situation in Northern Ireland. And I have to give an example to make myself clear, because generally people get cancelled in the bigger world for racist comments, comments that are obviously not politically in tune with the masses, sexist comments, those types of things. And so obviously, we're not proposing that people should be free to be racist in their views or free to bring down another person. That's not what we're proposing. But within the context of Northern Ireland, there are a lot of times when the dissenting view later on emerges as being said by somebody else in a more influential position, and it is not treated in the same way in which it was treated when it was said by the lowly community leader, for example. So I think for me, one of the alternatives a lot would be to take a step back when we hear dissenting views and really think about it. Really see if it makes sense rather than trying to wait for an opportunity when that same view is presented by somebody else whose line you want to join or whose bandwagon you want to be on. I hope that makes sense.
Perfect
Happy to
sense.
hear your thoughts, Sifo.
Perfect sense. You know what? I just between the two of you, you said so many things, and as you were talking, I'm like, yes, that I want to talk about that, and then I get lost in
So
there's so much. But do you know what? I think our community, the Black community, has so many strong characters and strong leaders that it becomes we become our own worst enemies. That's one thing for sure. Um, in our leadership skills or our leadership, because most of us are just, maybe I'd like to think most of us, should I include myself in that? I don't know, uh naturally born leaders. And that being said, in our leadership, we fail to actually kind of lead from the back sometimes. and lead quietly sometimes and listen to other people because we just want to lead from the, we want to be seen, we want to be seen. And as soon as somebody else is coming from a different direction and their views are kind of different from yours, and maybe kind of getting some kind of spotlight, you're thinking, what, why, who are you,
Competition.
and the competitions just it becomes too strong, and we fail to realize that, you know what, I can hold the ladder for this person to actually rise, and by them rising, this strengthens my community. We fail to actually realize this. We know it. We know it. That's the sad thing, is we know it, and it is a strength that we can use, but we are failing to tap into it. I don't know when we'll actually wake up and smell the coffee, but I'm hoping
Yes.
we're getting to that point, because honestly, um, it is something we've got the strength, and I believe we can do wonders if we tap into it and we actually just use our network. Um, it's something that people that are outside of our minority community realize that we have. They see this gem, this gold that we hold. And some people would kill for us to actually keep doing what we're doing, just detonating from within. There's people that are kind of sleeping over it and hoping that it stays that way. But we need to realize that we've got that and stop canceling each other, because we cancel each other every day. I look at Yolanda and go, I don't like her hair. I just don't like. I don't like the way she speaks. And then somebody comes and says, I need somebody who's got these skills. I know I don't have them, and I know Yolanda's got them. But do I then bring Yolanda's name to say, I know somebody that can do this? But then I go, "Well, I don't really like her, And then I just get quiet, turn around, and I bring somebody else, or I pretend I just don't know.
And
We need
because we're
to,
so small in Northern Ireland, that gets around, that
Mhm.
travels, and cancel culture
Yes.
becomes very real, even within this small context. And so we go back to
And
the
this
beginning where we're saying it doesn't have to be on social media where the masses are, but it's our context. So we have to speak about it from the context in which we live. So you've made some
and
very, very pertinent points, Sifo.
Very true. And the whole thing about what people of color like to say, and this I'm not just referring to Black people, but people of color like to say as well, is don't treat what one individual might have done or might do as, I'm saying, as representing the entire community. And you can take that on a big scale or small scale, because when Kanye made his anti-Semitic comments and he was cancelled by Balenciaga and Vogue and Adidas and all these people, people weren't saying, oh, it's all the rappers or it's all the musicians or it's all whatever. They just accepted that that was Kanye. And when Will Smith did his thing with the Grammys, which I'm not going to mention, they banned him for 10 years. Or people didn't say, oh, that's all actors or that's all Black actors or whatever. So why, when you take it down to a smaller level, if an individual expresses themselves in the community, in whatever way, they have that right and that freedom to do it. And it doesn't mean that that is the opinion shared by their organization, by their neighborhood, by their community, or by their political affiliations, or by their religious, organization. Why can't we separate the person from their community, and community on every side? Because we know Northern Ireland has a lot of communities. Community on any side. You can just accept people and people's point of views, whether it's good or bad. You can say, they shouldn't have said that. That wasn't, that wasn't the right thing. But don't tar the entire community with what they have said. I don't know if I'm living in a utopia or I'm hoping for a utopia, but when can we get to that point?
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think you are hoping you are living in utopia. We're not the Kanyes yet.
No.
Kanye is a brand. We are still just ethnic minorities, and it's easy to suppress a group of minority people. It's not easy to go, it's all actors, because there's a lot more actors that are better than Will Smith and whoever that are from the Black community. But as I said, there's a lot more people that are hoping that we continue to do what we do to each other. So as long as we don't realize that and decide to intentionally change it, as long as we're not intentional about it, it will continue to be this way. And unfortunately, it is a legacy that we're leaving for our children. So it's a choice.
Yeah.
It's
Well, I have an interesting question. Sorry, Yolanda,
If I
to
could
ask
just
you,
make
Sipho,
one
that
last point, Natasha, I
yeah,
suppose when we
yeah.
just revisit the whole negative impact of cancer culture, for me, one of the things is cancer culture normally brings to bear influence and power, how much influence and power a particular group has. So, say for example, Kanye West would have made, anti-Semitic comments. The amount of Jews and the power that the Jewish people have, or their influences and their network to boycott, is significant. Um, bringing it home to our community. Let us even say, for example, that we in Northern Ireland, there might be someone very influential, and we are quote unquote believing that this person should be cancelled because of their racist views or views that impact our community specifically. As an ethnic minority group in Northern Ireland, we don't have that much power to really, when you look at it from the other angle, us trying to stand up for ourselves or trying to quote unquote cancel another person who might have been, negative towards our homogenous group as Black people. We don't have that much power. So it's still a catch-22 if you flip it the other way. So I really don't know what the solution is. And we could talk all day about cancel culture. So I'm gonna hand over to you, Natasha, I promise.
No, no problem. No, that's all right. I was just going to ask Sifo, um, in which occasion, if any, would canceling someone be appropriate? Can you think of one? And if not, why? Can you think of any occasion or situation in which canceling someone might be appropriate?
okay. Firstly, I want to go back to a point that you were making there that we don't have the influence. I personally think we don't have so much of clout because we don't have much representation. And it's not just in politics, but in general, like in a lot of positions, we still need to fill a lot of positions for us to be able to see ourselves, for our children to be able to see themselves in all these positions so that we all feel the relevance of our community within the community. So as soon as we do that, when we get to that, then we can start having the influence because we'll start having the Black businesses, whatever you call it, integrated and da da da, da all those things that have the power. Because to me, all of that power comes from, you know, yeah, it's part of it. It's part of it's all part of a jigsaw. Um, when is it right to cancel someone?
If ever. I mean, if you don't think this ever right, then that's fine.
Do you know what? I don't think it's right. Um, I'm gonna make an example. Um, I'll try not to bring in names or draw to it, but recently I was invited to speak at an event, and I was gonna speak at the event, and then the person that had organized it's not a secret, the person that had organized had said something against a certain group a while ago, which I had no idea about. And I started reading up about it and I realized, oh, okay, okay. And there was also kind of like a few things that were said and misrepresented and all of that. But then there was more things that she had said or the person had said. And then I decided on my own because there was a lot of conversations, negative conversations around it. And I thought, you know what, this is starting to stress me out personally, And at first I decided, you know what, I know what I want to talk about, and this is targeting certain people. And I really have so much to say, at this event. I really, really wanted to be there. But it was becoming a thing where it was impacting my mental health, at home. I was sitting thinking, getting all these phone calls, and I thought, do I really need to do this? I actually don't need this in my life. And I rang the person that had organized and said, listen, I would have loved to be part of this, but I'm actually not going to. And I told her my reasons, and she was happy with that. Um, I think just looking back at that, there were people that were canceling that person. That person was cancelled within that context. Um, she might have had views dating back, but I think I don't know because I wasn't personally impacted. I don't know if I would felt that way if it was views to do with ethnic minorities, because that would be very close to me. So um, I would have preferred people to sit around the table and have a proper conversation with this person, and maybe they kind of explain themselves even more and things be resolved before we cancel. So what I'm saying is we do need to take a look from a different angle and have open minds and have more conversations before we cancel someone. So, yes, they will be and should be canceling of people, because there are issues that do need you to cancel someone. I mean, if you're blatantly racist, then you actually go on and say a lot of things that are just out of there. I'm sorry, you will be cancelled. And I advocate for that. Or sexist or whatever. But we do need to have conversations, to preempt a lot of things before we cancel someone. That's my view.
Well, I know, I know it's a big conversation, too much for half an hour, 45 minutes, even podcast. I
Okay.
think just Natasha, to add very quickly, I'm very, very, I don't know. I'm always kind of like the person sitting on the side saying, oh my God, yes, that person was terrible, but we don't have the right to cancel people, not even a Karen. We're not talking about Karens today, but not even a Karen, quote unquote, should be canceled, because that's like, to me, in my mind, taking away somebody's livelihood. There are other ways that we can deal with it than you put somebody out of a job. Even if the comments are racist, my heart still always goes out to trying to find another way. I mean, and I I know that's probably difficult for some people. See Natasha raise her eyebrows like, cancel them, yes, cancel them.
I bet it's fast.
I don't know. But we should have said this at the beginning. And I want to throw it in very quickly. This season has been funded by the National Lottery on the back of the symposium we held in October. Seems like a long way, but Black History Month in October, we would have been funded, quote unquote, to deliver a symposium looking at leveling up our community and how we can do that ourselves. But part of that project as well was to feature topics or issues raised by attendees within a podcast series. And believe it or not, cancel culture was one of the issues that was raised by one of the persons who attended our symposium. So today we are raising the volume on cancel culture.
Thank you so much for that, Yolande. We want to thank our guest today, Sipho Sibanda. Thank you for your thoughts, for sharing in our conversations, and for helping us to raise the volume on the issue of cancel culture in the Black and minority ethnic community in Northern Ireland. So thank you once again. I'm sure we'll be reaching out to you again in the future for another conversation, because today was just too short and sweet. But for our audiences, thank you so much for joining us today. Don't forget, you can share your thoughts with us on social media about this episode. You can find us at Unmute Now Podcast on YouTube, at Unmute Now on Facebook and Instagram, Unmute Now One on Twitter, and you can also email us at unmutenow1@gmail.com. Please find our audio version of the podcast on Spotify, iTunes, Google Podcasts, anywhere that podcast streaming occurs. Until next time, keep on raising the volume on the whispered conversations in our communities. Thank you, ladies. Bye.
Bye bye.
Bye.